Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking into the best Houston sports podcast. Robert along with Sports Radio 610, Shaun Bijani. If you're new to the party, welcome aboard. 45 years in journalism between the two of us, 35 covering sports in the Houston area. And later in the show, we're going to hit the comeback of an Astro favorite or potential comeback. But Shaun, the Texans, with two scrimmages against the Dolphins, are scrimmages more compelling than preseason games? What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. There was a time where I would have thought about that a little bit longer, but it's after taking one in yesterday, it's 100% more compelling. It's better reps, more quality reps for the starters, for really everybody, for the twos as well, twos and threes. And here's the reason why. Look, Stroud only got 11 reps in the preseason game last week, and you never know what the opposition is doing. In joint practices, it's best on best. It's 11 on 11 at all times. They do about 4 different team periods, and it's just boom, 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 boom. If you screw up a series, you screw up a drive, you want to work on something, you need to see a different look, you can go right back out there and do it. It's a controlled environment, and that's what you'll hear every coach across the league. You've heard it plenty from D'Amico leading up to these joint practices. That's why it's so important to them. Controlled because you're keeping your quarterback safe and upright, and controlled in the sense that your ones are going to get the reps that you wish you could afford to give them in the preseason without super risk of injury and things like that. Now, look, Terron Armstead, the Dolphins Pro Bowl starting left tackle, he went down with a leg injury. That kind of stuff is going to happen, which, he dodged a bullet. He's okay. At least that's what he told reporters. He'll be good for week 1. And the Texans seemingly made it out of both of these practices very healthy as well. But we already know, at least with their offensive line, that they've suffered, some soft tissue stuff already with 3 different guys in training camp. That stuff's going to happen. But in terms of, the hard hits, controlling the environment in that route and getting the real looks that you need to get from a coaching staff and from your ones on a player level, it's 100% the best. And I would be surprised if we didn't see teams doing more of these as the NFL and football really kind of continue to evolve and move away from preseason altogether.
Is there any explanation why the coaches seem less afraid of injuries in scrimmages than they are in these, fake games, I guess? I just doesn't make any sense to me.
You can control it in the sense, with your quarterbacks and things like that a little bit better. I mean, quarterbacks are off limits just like they used to be back in the day in high school and in college. Your red shirts or your red hats, don't touch the guys. If you break through, throw your hands up, let them finish a play. That's easy. In terms of everybody else, look, it's going to be like if you're hurting yourself running and nobody's really making any da-na-na tackles out there, you're thudding guys up. You can really gauge like where a guy is coming from and where he's going in terms of like angle tackling, pursuit, things like that in a controlled environment. And players understand, and you could see it. They're not going 110 miles per hour, 110%, trying to make a tackle. They're looking to get in position and they're going to thud you up, wrap up. It's pretty rare outside of like, in the trenches where you're going to see guys take somebody to the ground.
Let's go to our 1-minute drill. Everybody hopefully is starting to get into this. And Shaun, we're going to do some Texans and then we're going to do some Astros in the 1-minute drill. So a little bit of both. I'm going to reset the clock here to 1 minute. It's moving on me. But here we go. The first question is, CJ Stroud was named Saturday's starter. But Shaun, did Dameon Pierce say something that was kind of concerning about CJ Stroud?
Yeah, today in his availability at the podium, Dameon Pierce kind of slid it in there when he was talking about his quarterback, what the joint practices were like, how he's coming along. And he'd said CJ kind of gets tongue-tied in the huddle in giving plays to the team. And that is maybe a little bit concerning because you're talking about a guy who's been pretty invested and involved in the playbook for the better part of the last 3 months. And so the verbiage and relaying a play, if that's the case, and it's prevalent enough to where a guy like Dameon Pierce would even think to mention that when he's, talking about his quarterback, is a little concerning. But I'm not going to say it's a big time issue. Let's see how things look on Saturday and the rest of this preseason, because to this point, he's gotten his guys up to the line of scrimmage, gotten the ball off on time, and gotten everybody lined up well.
All right, great stuff. Hadn't heard that one at all. That's an interesting one. All right, let's get to the next one. 1 minute on the clock again. We saw the starting offensive line in the Dolphins scrimmage. Are they looking any better?
The Dolphins offensive line, or you mean the Texans? The Texans offensive line?
No, the Texans offensive line. I don't
Yeah,
care about the Dolphins offensive line.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, the Texans offensive line, they had a couple of rough days at practice. Thursday, was probably the worst. Wednesday, I wasn't thrilled about it, but it was pretty evident that CJ Stroud was, being flushed from the pocket. And some of that, his inability to find receivers in a timely manner was maybe on him for holding the ball a little bit too long, maybe just not on the same page with his offense. But the Dolphins pass rush dominated the Texans offensive line today. And I'm not going to say that's concerning. Ultimately, I think it's a good thing because you got to see a lot of success Wednesday versus not so much Thursday. And, the true tell, at least, what you can gauge from a preseason game, we'll see on Saturday. But the offensive line, I am concerned. And there are a lot of other things that we really need to discuss when it comes to the Texans offensive line.
All right, we can come back to the offensive line in a bit, but let's go to Tank Dell, who is still killing it out there. Is he wide receiver 1, Sean?
Man, as of right now, yeah. I mean, what's define wide receiver 1? The guy that you're going to look to get the ball the most to, right? The guy that's going to make plays for you, the guy that you need to move the sticks on passing downs when you have to have a first down. Tank Dell's been that guy. Tank Dell's been the guy as a red zone target. He caught 3 touchdowns on Wednesday and a couple more on Thursday, and he's doing it in spectacular fashion. I mean, the guy's getting open, stays open, and he's done it against some of the Dolphins' best, defensive backs. Ultimately, I think, and this is not like a de facto, okay, you can have it. I think it's earned. I think Nico Collins is going to be that guy. I think he should be that guy. And I think, any offensive coordinator in the league would look to get your biggest and best guy to stretch the field, the ball, a good red zone target. He's proven, his route running ability with these new route concepts. I like Collins to set up Dell and vice versa.
So you're saying Nico Collins is the big play threat for the Texans right now?
And that's exactly the verbiage that D'Amico Ryans used today. I think he's absolutely a big play threat and has been, a big play threat in training camp. And it really showed off again, opportunity again to go up against different defensive backs. I mean, I just watched him smoke a Dolphins cornerback with a very difficult name to pronounce today. But it was like literally Ferrari versus Toyota Camry. Like, who's going to win. And about 5 yards into Collins's route on a go, it was just like he just blazed past them, and a beautifully perfect thrown ball from CJ Stroud caught it in stride for a touchdown.
All right, next question. Can you find ways for Tank and Metchie to be on the field at the same time, or has Metchie shown you enough to deserve that? Because we know you want Tank on the field as much as possible.
Man, I kind of said this a couple of weeks ago. Like, if you didn't know Robert Woods was on the Texans, like, you're like, hey, who's that number 2 guy? Like, you really wouldn't have even cared to ask who it was. But Woods has emerged the last couple of weeks as a real target, and he's made plays. He's shown the propensity to get open and to be a factor in the pass game. I feel like John Metchie's kind of disappeared the last week or so, man. I don't see him doing too much out there. I don't see him being targeted too much. It's been Tank. It's been Nico. It's been Noah Brown. We've seen Xavier Hutchinson get some targets. He didn't come up with the ball all the time, victim of some overthrows and stuff like that. But I feel like Metchie's towards the bottom in terms of this wide receiver depth chart. So I don't know if it's a real question to ask who's going to get on the field at the same time between Metchie and Tank versus maybe Woods and Tank. And hell, Steven Sims, to me, has had a better camp the last 2 weeks than John Metchie.
All right, next up, how did the secondary look against one of the more dangerous wide receiving cores in the NFL, the Dolphins wide receiving core?
Excellent's probably too strong, but it's not a stretch to say they looked really freaking good. Jalen Petrie from day one, I mean, heck, even last year, he looks like he's going to be a perennial Pro Bowler if he's healthy. The guy's just a ball hawk. He's flying all over the place, making plays, involved in almost everything through the air, and even in the run game. He's coming up and just completing a pile and things like that. Derek Stingley had a really good day on Thursday. A couple of passes batted down, other good contests. I think he had a couple of interceptions, one for sure on Thursday. And, Steven Nelson's been a star in the secondary for the Texans. And Jimmy Ward is, again, like Petrie, involved in everything, not afraid to lay the wood. He's had a couple of hard hits, and before the Dolphins came in, a couple of really hard hits on his own guys, Tank Dell being one of them who got up gimpy. I think it was earlier this week or last week. They're going to be serious, man. They're scary.
All right, let me give you an extra minute because I know you got more on this offensive line for the Texans. And, I'm just curious, like we know Kenyon Green is a concern. Are there other holes on this offensive line right now besides Kenyon Green?
Titus Howard's the obvious one. Look, the Texans committed nearly $120 million to three players over the course of the last 6 months in guaranteed money: Laramie Tunsil, Titus Howard, and Shaq Mason. There's no reason to put so much faith in the Juice Scruggs right now. I personally need to see a lot more from him in terms of pass protection. I feel like that's where a lot of the pressures have been coming, is up the middle. And look, D'Amico spoke to that, today. From a defensive standpoint, understanding what his offensive line has to do, pressure. They want to get to the quarterback as soon as possible. The best route to that is up the middle, the A and B gaps. And Juice Scruggs has got to be a better pass protector. Kenyon Green, I don't know that guy's actually in great football shape right now. And the ramp-up period is long and over with him. He's having problems finishing a practice without having been rotated with Michael Dieter and, Sutherland at the guard position. And maybe it's just to get looks, maybe not. But I'm worried about those two guys particularly. George Fant, that dude's a large man. He's a beast. He's going to win that match one-on-one more times than not. What's going to be interesting to see is just how strategic defensive lines have to get with guys like Laramie Tunsil, Shaq Mason, George Fant. But I really worry about that left center portion of that line for the Texans because I don't think you can rest your hat on either one of those guys right now.
Real quick question. And I'm curious about Jonathan Greenard. We haven't talked much about him yet. He was really one of the few guys left from the pre-Nick Caserio years.
Yeah.
What do you think of Jonathan Greenard? Is he turned a corner this year, or is D'Amico getting the most out of him that we've seen?
Yeah, Greenard's had a good couple of days of practice, made some really good plays today, some pressures. He's very involved and effective, disruptive, is the word that D'Amico likes to use. He's healthy, which is the biggest thing for him. That's obviously been his biggest detractor. He led the team in sacks a couple of years ago, and last year, with him going down, in the middle portion of the season, Laramie Tunsil, Jerry Hughes kind of, took that on us as the team's best and most consistent pass rusher. I think this team is deep at the edge rusher position. It's going to be interesting to see going forward how D'Amico mixes and matches, those combinations, between Hughes and Anderson and Greenard. They've got some guys that have all really done a good job in camp so far and have shown the propensity to be disruptors and consistently effective in the pass rush.
Yeah, Greenard's just somebody that I feel like we've avoided a little bit, but yeah, he's all of a sudden at least looking a little bit better.
I feel that way too, but I also think he's kind of the victim of circumstance. We're talking about guys like Will Anderson, and a lot of people are watching him. And when he's not on the field, we're moving away to the other side of the field and we're going to watch the quarterbacks work, or we're going to watch the receivers work. And I think he's kind of getting lost in the shuffle a little bit. Look, has he really flashed and jumped off of the screen in the film room, for a lot of coaches? Look, maybe not, but I think the guy's just been consistent. There hadn't been any poor reports in regarding his play. And to be honest with you, what little I have seen of him on the field, I like what I see. He looks to be moving well, setting the edge, and affecting the run game in a positive way. And that's something that the Texans have done a really good job of across the board, particularly in these joint practices with the Dolphins. They've really, and look, the preseason game, I think this is trending in the right direction here, albeit preseason games, they held the Patriots to 78 yards on the ground. And, if not for the late fourth quarter drive by the Pats the other night, those numbers would look even that much better. They did a good job against the Dolphins in their run game these last 2 days. So I think it's certainly trending upward. And look, I even broached the question today, is it out of the realm of possibility that this team goes like from 31st 2 straight years, I think it was, or maybe 32nd last year, in the worst run defense in the entire league, to maybe not just breaking the top 20, but maybe taking a look at the top 15 at the end of the season?
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. And I want to get opinions out there from everybody that listens to us. Do you like the 1 minute drill? Let us know. That 10-second on the clock left for Shaun, that's where you hear the ding if you're listening on audio. So if you hear that ding, he's got 10 seconds to sort of wrap things up. Let's go to the Astros, and we'll keep the 1 minute drill going. And Shaun, if Michael Brantley comes back, which guy do you most fear gets squeezed out of this lineup?
Most fear? Mauricio Dubon. The obvious guy that gets squeezed out of this rotation and misses some playing time is probably Jake Myers. And I'm not too fearful of that by any stretch, because even a Michael Brantley that's not 100%, you'd have to feel like wipe the floor with anything that Jake Myers has given you. And his problem's obviously been, consistency at the plate. Certainly we're not talking about his defensive capabilities in the field, but I worry about Mauricio Dubon. This guy's been a consistent bat. He's a guy you feel comfortable with defensively, throwing him basically anywhere in the field. And I feel like it's just going to be a turnstile between left field, center field when Brantley does come back. And Dusty's really going to have to figure out a way to get creative and find ways to keep Dubon's bat in the lineup, keep it fresh, keep him somewhat consistent. I worry about Oh, you got to give me 3 more seconds for having to cough on that one. I worry about, I worry a little bit about, just Dubon being relegated to almost like an Aledmus Diaz specific role. And some guys are best suited for that. I think Dubon, at least for this year, and that's what all that matters at this point, is best suited for being in the lineup consistently, because he's been fantastic at the plate.
I just feel like there was a big overstatement. I think you're still with the mindset of Mauricio Dubon first 2 months of the season. Mauricio Dubon is basically who Mauricio Dubon's been his entire career. He's got a 661 OPS, 263 batting average. He's been fine, but I mean, it's not like, oh, you're going to miss that. You mentioned the guy. Yonder Diaz basically is getting his at-bats outside of maybe once a week or twice a week at catcher. He's getting any extra at-bats as a DH. And when I look at things, when Brantley comes back, you just got to rotate DH left field between Brantley and Jordan. And you've got no choice if you want to get Brantley and Jordan both in the lineup. One of those guys has got to play DH unless, I don't know, Shaun, are we going to be shocked and just like dumbfounded when Michael Brantley ends up playing first base? Is that actually going to happen, or is that realistic? At this point, especially, you got John Singleton right now. Do you play Michael Brantley at first? They won't play Yonder Diaz at first base. Let's remember this. Yonder Diaz played in the minor leagues. He got a good amount of innings. I want to say I looked it up. It was 440 innings and had 5 errors, but they don't want to touch him at first base. Dusty says, oh, I don't trust him, whatever. So you're going to trust Michael Brantley at first base instead, that basically hasn't even been on the field in 13 months and has been an outfielder his whole career? To me, it's the obvious. Like, I'm scared to death Yonder Diaz is down to 1 or 2 a week, and he's, we know he's one of the best hitters on the team.
Taking Diaz away from the time that he would have, typically behind the plate is probably a little bit of a concern. I know Dusty's clearly decided to go with Maldi more times than not with Yiner, but he is the future. And I think there is some element, some degree, that Dusty and the Astros have to treat that with respect. So any opportunity that you have to get Yiner behind the plate and handling these pitchers would only benefit you, not just now, but certainly in the future. And look, it's funny because once upon a time ago, earlier this season, you didn't have options at first base. And, with Abreu down with injury and them kind of shelving him for a little bit, John Singleton's been called up. He stepped in at first base a little bit, and we know Yordan in a pinch could play it if need be. They have other guys that they could put in there, but Brantley, look, he's on his second different rehab stint, in the second game of this second rehab stint Thursday night. I don't know if he's playing first base down in Sugar Land or not. I don't know where he is in the lineup, but I know he's playing. I know he took reps in spring training before stuff hit the fan. Could he fill in a pinch? Yeah, maybe so, but you know what? One of the plays of the year at shortstop from Jeremy Pena a couple of nights ago against the Marlins came with John Singleton at first base, and he did a heck of a job of digging that ball out of the dirt and giving Jeremy Pena the dun-na-na opportunity. So I feel pretty good as long as Singleton's bat is relatively close to what it's been to give him this, second shot with the Astros. That gives you a really good option. The thing that gets very, very tricky is you do throw Yiner Diaz into the equation, and then you ask yourself, well, what about Michael Brantley if he is producing? What about Mauricio Dubon? Because he's an important guy for us and has been to this point. We're going to need his bat to stay pretty fresh and reliable off the bench, especially come postseason time. You need a big pinch hit opportunity or a defensive replacement late in the game, whatever the case may be. So
who is anybody going to pinch hit for? Because if your lineup in the postseason is the best batters out there, which, we know who those guys are, and the only guy to pinch hit for is typically Maldi, and Maldi doesn't get pinch hit for now in the 7th, 8th, 9th inning in games that are close, and there's guys on base, and Maldi's like 11 for 74 with runners in scoring position, and he doesn't get pinch hit for. So who's Dubon pinch hitting for? Because that's the only guy. It's Maldonado would be the one guy you would pinch hit for. I don't care about Maldi. Maldi didn't even, we didn't have Maldi in the postseason last year. He didn't do much of anything in the postseason last year.
Sure. I mean, in a perfect world, but, I'm thinking, if somebody was to get a little banged up, somebody to get injured, he needs to come in as a defensive replacement, stuff like that. Things happen like that in the postseason. We'd seen it before. Jake Myers going down a few years ago with the shoulder in Chicago against the White Sox. Look, it's not going to be perfect. And look, Dubon, he's relegated to this role pretty much right now that he's been used to this point of his career, outside of, being thrust in and thrown to the fire and being a starter every single day. When Altuve went down with the broken thumb in the WBC, the job was his, right? And it's just been a pretty easy fit. And we were all blessed and lucky to get the type of production out of him. But I know it's not going to be perfect. It's just the guy that's had such a great season, the best of his career, the most productive and the most fun that he's ever had. And he
probably needs some rest at this point, if we're being honest, because he's played just about every single day with all the injuries. So I don't know. Let's go to the next one on the clock. Let's go to the 1 minute again. And as it stands now, Shaun, is Cristian Javier in your playoff rotation? And let me just throw this out there. Framber, Verlander, JP France, they've all got to be in at 1, 2, 3, I would think. Does Javier beat out Hunter Brown and Jose Urquidy for that 4 spot? What's going to happen there?
Not right now, but you just mentioned the order. It's Framber, JV, and JP France. There's your 1, 2, 3 right now. In terms of what have you done for me lately and shown any kind of ability to figure things out, be consistent, it's Hunter Brown. Hunter Brown's got to be the 4th guy. He's been the most consistent of the bunch. Now, small sample size for Jose Urquidy, who had, his second outing since coming back from injury. Really good. Got you through 5, kept you in a ball game, good enough to win. I think he ended up losing that ball game, or the Astros did, 2-1 the other night. But ultimately, it's you got to score some runs. And with this lineup, you expect to score runs. Who do I think gives you the best opportunity to win most consistently right now out of Cristian Javier, Jose Urquidy, or Hunter Brown? It's Hunter Brown without a question. It's not a doubt in my mind. I know people are concerned about that because you're relying so much on this veteran, and you question how much does a guy like JV have left, and you're relying so much on the young guys, JP France and Hunter Brown. What can they really give you? You're relegated to a guy that maybe wasn't prepared to be the ace of this ball club this year in Framber. I don't really think that's a fair question, but that's a pretty solid four. You could do a heck of a lot worse, Robert, than going Fromber, JV, JP France, and Hunter Brown in a playoff rotation.
Yeah, I don't know that Fromber wasn't prepared. I think it's been a lot of innings the last few years on all of these guys, and I think it's caught up to a lot of them, including Justin Verlander. We've seen a little bit less of a Justin Verlander over the last year or so, and I think it's caught up to him because he just can't strike guys out like he used to. And we saw it again against the Marlins this week.
Yeah.
It just seemed like, you give a 5-0 lead. Typically, you're like, well, we're on easy street. And Justin Verlander is battling out there to get you 4 or 5 innings, which is not the Justin Verlander we've come to expect. As far as Hunter Brown is concerned, yeah, I mean, you and I would have him ahead of Cristian Javier this year. My concern is Dusty. It's like he is so blind when it comes to what's going on in front of him as opposed to what's happened the last 3 or 4 years. That's my only fear, Shaun, is that right there.
Yeah. And look, you got 40 ball games left, and so you're looking at maybe seven more starts for a guy like Cristian Javier to put something together, figure things out, and try to regain some of that sustainability, consistency, work deeper into ball games. You ask similar questions about Hunter Brown. What about his sustainability in terms of his inning threshold, his workload? How much load management could you possibly have for a guy? I mean, it can be done. You could get this guy theoretically deep into the postseason as your 4th starter. Depending on how things shake out, he might even be a good 3 option for you, to be honest with you. But you could get him towards the end of the season at the pinnacle, World Series champions again, and have him right around that 140 inning mark. But you have to get pretty creative, and you're also going to have to get some guys to step up to finish this regular season out for you and get you deeper into some of these ball games and give you some more quality starts. Jose Urquidy's a big factor in that. Cristian Javier just trying to figure out the best of what he's got left in this regular season is a big factor in that as well.
Yeah, you've got to get either the old Cristian Javier or the old Framber Valdez to come back, because the old Justin Verlander is gone. He's 40 years old. It's not going to happen. So one of these other two guys really has to return to form.
You'll take something in between of what Fromber gave you 2 starts ago versus his last start, and when he some way managed to get through 7 innings and give up 6 earned runs.
Really, it's been outside of that no-hitter.
Yeah.
It hasn't been good for a pretty good while now. It's been over a month, I think, where he's really been struggling. Let's go to the last 1-minute drill question, and it has to do with Rafael Montero, whose last 14 games, he's put up a 1.84 ERA and a 104 batting average against. Do you trust him again, Shaun, or does it matter that this has mostly been done in low leverage situations over the last month?
That's the key. Don't ask me to trust a guy that has put up those kinds of numbers in, extremely favorable circumstances. You paid this guy a lot of money for what he did for your ball club last year in the highest of leverage situations. He was a guy that you could absolutely count on and a part of, one of the most dominant bullpens you'll ever see in Major League Baseball. And to come back this year and be so poor at just being consistent, getting outs, figuring out, look, the strikeout to walk ratio, that kind of stuff, like you can live with that. But the dude's just flat out gotten hit, and he's just serving it up for guys and has imploded time and time again. I need to see him do what he's done against stiff competition when the spotlight is on in these high leverage situations. And thankfully for the Astros and him specifically, you got the opponents coming up. You've got two big series with the Red Sox that are still a threat coming up. You've got the Yankees coming up. And look, you've got a team that plays you very, very well that you're about to start a series with tomorrow at home against the Seattle Mariners. So there's going to be plenty of opportunities against some pretty good opponents to where he can still show what he's hopefully very capable of doing and really needed by his ball club to, I think, take them deep into the postseason.
Yeah, I agree with you. I have to see him in some more high leverage situations. It's interesting, Shaun, when it's a blowout where the game isn't close, there is one set of guys that come out of the bullpen. And when the game is close, there's another set of guys. It's like the Astros bullpen is the haves and the have-nots. And when the game's close, we see Presley, we see Abreu, we see Graveman, I think, a little bit now. And as he gets a little bit more comfortable, I think you're going to see him and, of course, Hector Neris. Then when the game isn't close, it's Montero, Ryan Stanek, and, right now it's Parker Mashinsky.
Yeah,
but
and he looked good the other night.
Yeah, the one guy that I would say we would be a little bit on the fence on is Phil Maton, because he was looking good for the first half of the season. Recently, it hasn't been so much. So I don't know where he fits into this hierarchy. But I think with Graveman here, I think he moves behind Graveman, and he's more in the have-nots than he is in the haves right now.
I think it's fair to just say TBD going forward in terms of the value that he brings, and how much you can trust him. Look, he had a game a couple days ago. He came in that real close ball game. The Astros won 6-5. Came in, needed to get one out, got the strikeout, boom, done. Look, that's about as high a leverage a situation that he's probably pitched in the last, 2 or 3 weeks, it feels like. But he got the job done against a club that very easily, has shown the propensity to come back on anybody, and almost did the other night against the Astros before they busted out with 6 runs in the 7th inning. That in and of itself kind of makes me feel a little bit better, at least positioning yourself in these last 40 ball games. The fact that this offense, as they're about it, as full of strength as you're going to get in terms of guys that you really should be able to rely upon. Sorry, Michael Brantley, but this feels like the ball club of 2019, of 2017, that offense that, like they could get hot at any time, like white hot. And that's what I thought of the other night when they put 6 runs on the board in the 7th inning. It just happened in a flash. They did it, with timely hitting. They did it by knocking the ball out of the ballpark. They did it by hitting the gaps. They did it with good base running, smart base running. And so that makes me feel a little bit better about, maybe this is sustainable in a year in which, they've struggled to get consistent pitching, both the starting rotation and the bullpen. This team is that talented to where they could overcome that. I know the postseason is a little bit different than the regular season, but I'm just trying to get in the best possible position to make that postseason run right now.
Yeah, I just have a hard time believing this is going to be different from other postseasons. Usually postseasons are decided with pitching. Usually if you've got that offense, that's some juggernaut offense, it runs into some hot pitching staff, like a hot goalie in hockey or something like that. And it's really hard to overcome that. And that's why I keep going back to Javier and Fromber, and you need those guys to somehow return to the form. And Fromber, it's not so much the form from last year, it's just the form from a month ago. And Cristian Javier, my concern is beyond concern at this point, because I just don't see a real pathway to get from being this bad for a few months out of the year to get it all, turned around and everything like that. I mean, Shaun, it's just, the thing about this offense, Shaun, is, we talk about it being kind of hot and cold, but when it all is said and done, last I checked, just a couple of days ago, they're 6th in runs scored. So that's pretty darn good, considering you've missed a lot of time with Altuve, a lot of time with Jordan, and you haven't had Michael Brantley the whole year. That's some big bats that you've been missing, and they still done it. Also, they've had Yainer Diaz on the Dusty Baker injured list, so he is not been allowed to play half the season because Dusty has had him on his personal injury list. So that's pretty good what their offense has done despite all that.
I saw some pretty attractive numbers last night. I think it was by a guy on Twitter, Tony Adams. He comes up with some really good facts and figures for the Astros, and did a comparison of Jose Altuve in the leadoff spot versus everybody else that has been in that spot in the lineup all season long. And the numbers are ridiculous. Altuve literally has half the amount of plate appearances as everybody else pulled together. And the production, is clear. The plus weighted runs created from Jose Altuve is something like 178 versus like 65 for everybody else. It's just stupid. When that guy's in the lineup, he is legitimately, the truth, a game changer. And the Astros have so many of those guys that you're seeing continuously produce really at the right times. They try to battle these dang Rangers, and just like a mosquito, they won't go away. They just won't relinquish that top spot. I'm talking about your Alex Bregmans, your Yordan Alvarez's, your Kyle Tuckers. The numbers that all of these guys have produced when Yordan first went down with that injury, and he's been back for 19 games now, and you're seeing it continue. When this club clicks on all cylinders and guys are producing and they're all feeling good at the same time, they're dangerous as anybody else out there, even what looks to be like a really super dominant Atlanta Braves team in the National League. Boy, I hope somebody knocks them off before the Astros hopefully can see them in the World Series. But we'll worry about that point when we get there. I feel really good about it, and I'm with you. Ultimately, I'd way rather rely on, hot, consistent pitching versus out slugging anybody, especially in the postseason.
All right. Last thing I wanted to hit on was this NBA schedule release and the Rockets schedule coming out. And typically, I don't care much about the NBA schedule. It doesn't matter to me as much as, say, the NFL schedule, because everybody in the NBA is playing the same teams, right? And they've taken away a lot of the back-to-backs and some of that sort of stuff. But this is what I do care about, Shaun. This is what I do think is interesting. And by the way, it is kind of fun that they're starting the season off. The first two games are against Orlando and San Antonio, which means against Paolo and against Wembanyama. And why is that sort of fun? Is that, those two guys were chosen over Amen Thompson and Jabari Smith. So those guys might come out with a little bit. I'm talking about the Rockets players might come out with a little bit of like, hey, we want to show you that we were just as good as those two top picks. However, what's interesting about the schedule, Shaun, is home games early in the season. That's what I look at. And with the Rockets, they start off 2 games on the road, those 2 games, but then they have 7 straight home games. And what I have noticed from watching the NBA for close to 50 years is that when you have an easier schedule early in the season and you can get off to a little bit better of a start, there's a momentum a lot of times when you're a young team specifically, as the Rockets are. And last year, they had this terribly weighted road schedule early on. And once you're a young team and you start losing games, it gets hard to get out of it. It gets hard to get motivated, play defense. We saw that a lot with the Rockets the last couple of years, but it's just it's almost like an avalanche that's coming at you, as opposed to now they're going to have there's tough home games early in the season, but the NBA schedule is just tough these days. I mean, there's so many good teams, especially out West. And so I think that's going to matter. 2 road games, yes, but then they followed up with 7 home games, Shaun. That's a big deal.
It is a big deal. I think it's a great point by you in getting, so much home cooking early in a season with a new, very young team, obviously, different demands, rightfully so, from Ime Udoka. I saw, I was looking at 2 other stretches of the schedule as well, around the time where, people say the NBA season really begins around Christmas. There's a stretch where the Rockets play 11 of 15 games at home, from December 11th through January 6th. And I think that's really good timing for a little bit of home cooking as well, because you kind of know who you are. You know who at least you're trying to be, rather, at that point in time. And, playing a lot of home games, 11 to 15 could be pretty good medicine. But one part I do worry about is going to the All-Star break. They got a lot of road games going to the All-Star break. This team could be huffing and puffing and, sluggish. And we'll just see how conditioned, how many dogs they really have on this squad going into the All-Star break. They got 13 to 20 games. They got depth.
There's depth.
They got depth.
And the other thing is, you don't mind a little back half more difficult schedule if you're the Rockets, because what you expect is this team's going to take some time to develop some chemistry. You got a new coach. You got, 2 big new starters into the mix with Van Vliet and Dylan Brooks. You're totally revamping and remember how slow Udoka's team started off in Boston when they went to the finals. And then he got that team going in the right path around December, I think it was around January, actually, that he really got them going. And that, to me, that's good that, if you're going to have a tougher part of the schedule, you'd rather be it in the back half. And I think the Rockets will be a much better team, and Udoka will have a much more going in the right direction.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I like that. Let me ask you a question. What do you think about the 14 sets of back-to-backs for the Rockets? Do you happen to know? Because I remember this usually being a thing back in the day. It felt like the Rockets had more sets of back-to-backs than just basically anybody else in the entire darn league. Rockets got 14 of them. And I know the NBA schedule-wise has kind of, tried to lighten up on that for everybody. But I'd be interested to see, what that looks like from the Rockets compared to everybody else.
Yeah, I haven't seen what the other guys look like. So that's what matters, is how they compare to some of the other. My feeling is, and I've said this before, I just want the schedule shortened so we can just eliminate the back-to-backs. And I like the idea that somebody brought up that just said, hey, look, let's do 2 games a week. Every game is either a Wednesday, a Saturday, or a Tuesday, or I'm sorry, Wednesday, Sunday, or Tuesday, Saturday, or something like that, to where you space out the games. There's never anything close to a back-to-back. You do like 60 games or something, and you make the NBA like 2 days a week, to where everybody's thinking that's NBA days, in the same way that we think Sunday is NFL, or Sunday and Monday is NFL. Let's make the NBA 2 days a week. And so where everybody's, kind of zoned into the NBA at that same time. And I think that would be just a huge deal with you. We would see guys, we wouldn't have to deal with this whole, management of, guys where they just don't play because it's a back-to-back or something like that, or 2 games in 4 and 5 nights or something.
I mean, that's a pretty good thought, out loud. I like it. I'd like to see it on paper. I don't think you'd want anything on Sunday and competing with the NFL if at all possible. But, like a Saturday or something, like if you could find out the optimal time in which you'd get the most natural set of eyeballs on TV screens that would not be competing with the NFL. Is that Saturday? Is that Friday? Is that still Thursday, where you'd technically be competing with the NFL?
Well, they're going to be competing against the NFL, whether it's Saturday or Sunday, but you want one of those on the weekend, because of course, Saturday, once the playoffs start, you're going to have, I think it's, 3 or 4 weeks where you're going to have NFL games on Saturday as well, not just Sunday.
Yeah.
So you've got that issue.
You're right. Yeah.
And you've also got them going against Saturday games in college football. Do you want to fight against college football for the first month? It would just be fighting against college football for about a month, and then it's over with. And but you got everybody into a pattern of, this is when the NBA is, and this is, today's the day I got to think NBA, because it's, instead of where, I think in a lot of different stuff that we've got going on in the United States overall, one of our big issues is we think more is always better. And sometimes it's just not. Sometimes less is better. Give your fans something to wait for and kind of get up for. And, instead of like jam it down their throat every single night of the week.
Yeah, no, it's a great thought. And I was just thinking too, like, what would prevent you from flipping it? So what, you got to compete with, I don't know how much really competition there would be versus college football. I mean, it would be on, but that's in large part during the day. Probably play your NBA games in the evening. But, once the NFL season's over with and Super Bowl and everything's done, what would prevent you from flipping it? Okay, we're not playing on Saturdays anymore. We're going to move it to Sundays, and we'll move the game in the middle of the week up, a day as well. So instead of playing on Tuesday, you play Wednesday, something like that. I like the idea. I think that whoever had that idea, my hat's off to them. Now let's just see it put into action, because I think I could dig that.
Yeah, there's always going to be something. You're going to be fighting against March Madness or fighting against the Masters or whatever. There's always something. But I think, it's just about getting everybody into a routine of, this is their day. This is the NBA's day. And it's 2 days a week. And it would also just do, the other thing is just, we wouldn't have to worry about, load. I was trying to come up with the term load management. Load management is the term that, people are just sick and tired of. And fans are tired of paying season tickets, and then when they're out, oh good, LeBron James coming into town that one time a year, oh well, no, LeBron James isn't playing because it's load management, or Steph Curry isn't playing because it's load management.
That's really ultimately what you would be doing this for, is to prevent that sort of thing from happening. But I'm also thinking about, if you relegated yourself to just 2 days of NBA action per week, where everybody's playing on the same 2 days, in large part, you're playing around the same time, unless you started having these day games and stuff like that. And if you did, like, who's able to watch them? What's the viewership look like in those specific markets? Like LA, New York, your big ones.
Well, what's fun is everybody's playing that day. So if everybody's playing that day, and you could line these schedules up, because you know what? if you're not a fan of like one team, and usually if you're a fan of one team, you're focusing on your team's games all through the week. You might catch a couple other games, maybe, but probably not much. But the people that are just like, I'm an NBA fan. Well, this is great because on Tuesday and Saturday, from about 8 o'clock till 12 o'clock, I can go from one game to another and watch like the great endings in a bunch of different games because all the teams are playing. So you'll have like, 15 games? So you'll be able to just like flip over and go, oh, there's another ending. There's another ending. There's another ending. There's another ending. And you could watch that, those nights, and it just becomes like super fun to do that. Not to mention the fact that, I think it might be a little bit of fun for the betting fans too. Like having it all on one day, it's like a betting extravaganza.
Yeah. For a guy that likes to do that, just doesn't do it as much as I'd like to. Yeah, I can only imagine how many heart attacks that would cause, like with so much action going on. But yeah, a lot of excitement too. I mean, the parlays that would be in play, and you not having to wait a day or two or three to see one through. Yeah, that'd be pretty fun. I'm here for it. I'd like to see something put together, at least informally.
Yeah, there's a whole conversation with this, but that's just a little bit that I got on that. Saturday, we've got preseason, so tune in. We're going to have our live Texans post-game show on Saturday. Looking forward to that. And big weekend for the Astros against the Mariners. We'll be talking about that at some point next week. Great to talk with you, Shaun. We'll see you again just a couple of days.
Yes, sir. Good stuff. Enjoyed it.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Hey, don't forget to support us by subscribing and commenting on YouTube. You can always listen to us on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends about us and share our show links on social media. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.